Hello everyone, welcome back to my next video. This is all going to be about Bee Gees' first. This was their first international album, so I love this album already for starters because this is the album that introduced Bee Gees to the whole world. It was actually album number 3 for them because their first 2 were released only in Australia, which you can have a look at my previous videos. I'm just going to wing this, so just bear with me. It's been ages since I've actually even looked at this record sleeve. I've had this, for about 30 years almost, and it's an original 1967 edition, which is the one I really recommend. There's also this 2006 reissue, which has got a fantastic booklet and bonus tracks, and I'll try and review the best I can all of this. This is very different to their first 2 albums because now they're getting into Baroque music and classical instruments, things like the flugelhorn and the cello, and the music sounds kind of like cathedral music of the 17th century. They took, I believe anyway, psychedelia to a whole other level. It wasn't just a way of becoming more chart-orientated. I mean, I think a lot of people think that, have thought that. A lot of speculators thought this was their way to become like Herman's Hermits and get a top 40 hit. But this is nothing like Herman's Hermits. It's taking pop to a new level. What the Beatles did on Revolver, making art, turning rock and pop music into an art. I love that. Let's go song by song and then I'll see what else I can say. The first song is Turn of the Century, which was covered by The Circle, and it was also a hit for them. The song is all about the nostalgizing 1900 and, those big bicycles they used to have with a big front wheel and those kinds of images, very clearly evoked in this song. I might even play a song actually. So if you excuse me, I might play a song while I'm talking. But Holiday, I really love Holiday. I remember in the movie version that was just released a few months back, in 2020, they had the How Can You Mend a Broken Heart. I remember it ended on the instrumental version of Holiday, and I thought that was just amazing, even though it's never been released. But it shows, when you take out the vocals, it shows how inventive they were production-wise and arrangement-wise, wow, and those harmonies. Interesting to note about the harmonies is the harmonies are here, but they didn't really see themselves as a harmony band. I Just Gotta Get a Message to You on the next album. They actually didn't record the background vocals at all. They didn't envisage it. So Robert Stigwood rings them up at midnight and says, you're coming back to the studio to record, overdub the vocals, and that's what they did. And could you imagine the Bee Gees without vocals prominently? Red Chair Fade Away, that's a fine song. Very fine, violins in it, and quite unique, but not unlike maybe British bands like the Hollies. 1 Minute Woman, I think Jose Feliciano covered that and had a big hit with that as well. I could never understand why the Bee Gees didn't have a hit with 1 Minute Woman. It is an amazing song, and it's the first song on this album that proves that they're a real soul band, or a blue-eyed soul band, not unlike the Rascals, Tommy James and the Shondells and things like that. In My Own Time, very Beatlesque, Every Christian Light-Hearted Man, oh my God, that song is pure psychedelia. Pure psychedelia. That song they were clearly not trying to be a hit with that song for once, because Bee Gees are always, especially Robin, was always pushing for a hit. But it's probably my favourite song of all time by the Bee Gees, would be Every Christian Light-Hearted Man Will Show You. I think someone commented to Morris that they were so underground because they heard that song where, and it got them high, or they were listening to it when they were smoking drugs. And Morris just laughed that off and said, how could we be so underground where you can't get more overground than the Bee Gees? This is going back to about, a 1971 interview. But, you know, if you really want to hear how psychedelic they can get, listen to Every Christian Light-Hearted Man Will Show You. Then there's also a song called Craigslington Royal Academy of Arts. God, how long is that title? It is an epic title. What's so special about that song is they just came to England, London, I believe. That's where the recording studio was anyway. And they were on, you know, Carnaby Street or one of those high-end fashion centres. And they're walking with Johnny Young, and they see this Scottish man dressed in traditional wear and selling stuff, you know, as they would do in the old days, you know, just a free trader on the street selling stuff. And let's just put it politically correct, let's just say his mental faculties weren't all there. So instead of poking fun at him, which of course would be a totally wrong thing to do, they wrote a song. It's a wonderful song. And Johnny Young did a fine version of it too, and that was the version that was most performed on TV. It was Johnny Young's version, and had a chance to chart, even though it wasn't a huge chart success as far as I'm aware. It's a fine, fine song. By the way, what I'm playing now is House of Lords, if you can hear it. That's one of the bonus tracks on the 2006 edition. Beautiful. I might just turn it up. You can hear the very unique sounds of the Bee Gees, you know. Falsettos are a long way off, disco's a long way off, but I'll get to that in a moment. I will get to that. Very, very unique sound. Some people compare them to the Moody Blues or something like that, or the Hermits, or the Hollies. I think it's really none of the above. It's their own kind of mix of stuff. It makes it so interesting, but it's the Baroque sentiment that I really love, the Baroque kind of production. It's kind of music you can hear in a cathedral, you know. It's really beautiful. By the way, this is what the rear sleeve looks like of the original 1967 album. Side 2, New York mining disaster. You get version 1 on this disc, on this 2006 edition. And yeah, so that's an interesting story in itself. They were in the studio recording something. What most people got to understand with the Bee Gees, they're songwriting machines. So they're in the studio, they're writing when they're in the studio. Most people write first, or they write when they're on tour, and then they come into the studio and that's all they think about. No, not the Bee Gees, they're actually writing lyrics, they're coming up with new songs. So there is this blackout. Funny, because there was a blackout in the late 70s too, which is a completely different story with Staying Alive. And the whole hip-hop movement started from that blackout. But in 1967, they had a blackout, and instead of, you know, waiting for it to come back on, they used that 10 minutes to write New York mining disaster. They were sitting on the steps of Polydor, Robert Stigwood's organisation. IBC Studio it was called. Sitting on the steps there. By the way, Klaus Woolman designed this. You may know him from Revolver. He also designed Revolver. Great German guy who was a great mate of all the Beatles and is still alive. Great German guy who actually was a fan of the Beatles even before they broke out in England. So yeah, having an ally like him I think was always a good thing for the Bee Gees. But yeah, New York mining disaster, 1941. Wrote itself. Barry talks in the film, How Can You Mend a Broken Heart? During a blackout, and they wrote it in very quick time, so that's quite amazing. Cucumber Castle, you're hearing it now. This is just called early version. This song is really a casting the style of the Bee Gees, really nice and early, because there's a very small hint of R&B here. And yet it's still very Brit pop, and Four Faces, the Mods, you know, really capitalised on the soul sounds. But they were a little bit more on the heavy side of rock, and they called that R&B. Bee Gees sort of had a more softer R&B sound, which dominated the 70s. less to do with the roots of blues and more to do with the rhythm, if you like, of black music, black rhythm. So yeah, Cucumber Castle definitely reminds me of, in a funny way, Paul Weller and the Jam and all that whole mod movement that moved into the 80s. Also a film called Cucumber Castle. That wasn't until 1970. Had nothing to do with the song, but it was, if you like, the enactment of that song, and it had Frankie Howard in it, great mate of the Bee Gees, I believe. It had Ringo Starr, who was a great mate of Morris Gibb, and Eric Clapton and the whole, and Steve Winwood, the entire band called Blind Faith is a band with very little video, very little material, and very little video, and yet they appear in the Cucumber Castle movie and perform a concert there. So that's the kind of names the Bee Gees would rub shoulders with in the 60s. Next song is probably the most legendary song they ever did, To Love Somebody, and that was really interesting to watch in the movie How Can You Mend a Broken Heart, how that song was born. It wasn't just written out of the blue or written just with a certain soul singer in mind. Robert Stigwood actually took Barry Gibb to see Ahmet Ertegun from Atlantic Records, but also Otis Redding. He saw Otis Redding in concert, and obviously Robert Stigwood was a genius of a manager and saw what kind of potential the Bee Gees had. He already was preempting them as an R&B group. He watched him, and that night he wrote To Love Somebody with him in mind. How do you like that? Amazing. To Love Somebody's got to be one of the most covered songs ever. Nina Simone did a version, and it's one of the most loved soul songs, just, regardless of colour. You got to say that song is as good as just about anything out of Motown or Stevie Wonder. It's just one of those amazing songs. I Close My Eyes. That's what you're hearing now. That's also the next one on side 2. This is the alternate take, and very Beatles, very Hollies, very Beatles, circa 1965. There's a tinge of garage in there, and it's got that echo of garage music of the time, but also the harmonies are going on there too. I Can't See Nobody. It's a great song. I Can't See Nobody is very, I don't know who, but it's very psychedelic, very Jefferson Airplane or someone like that. The Byrds did a song called This World's on Fire. It's got that kind of Tom Petty. What's going to become Tom Petty about a decade later? I just think, yeah, very, very modern. I don't even know how you categorize that music. It's not that soulful, maybe more. Yeah, I suppose it is soulful. Soul and a little bit of just American rock. It's really good. Of that period, the late 60s and 70s. Now we get into one of my favourite songs called Please Read Me. That song has historical significance that wasn't foreseen in 1967, that's for sure. Why? Well, it's actually about Barry Gibb sitting on a psychiatrist's couch and having a session. A very, very fashionable subject of the time. Nina Simone, by the way, covered that song. She could probably relate to it. The point is, he does a falsetto in that song. 8 years before, they actually went disco and discovered the falsetto on a song called Nights on Broadway. Now, that's a song where you can just blink and miss it. It's just a very brief part of the song. However, it's so significant. He's obviously trying to emulate Brian Wilson and Frankie Valli. Please read me. When he sings the line, read me, he is going an octave higher and singing a falsetto. He obviously loves it, even before knowing that he's actually doing a falsetto, unlike Nights on Broadway where he was asked to do some ad-libs, and he knew he had to scream and do a high voice. But he already discovered it, he just didn't know it. This is why I love listening to this record, and why I love listening to most music of that period, whatever style, is that A lot of things were discovered by accident, which for decades would carry on and would inspire and capture the imagination of generations of artists to come, including 2021. We're still culturally in the same era as the 1960s. So that is beautiful. And finally, Close Another Door, great song which was probably released as a single in Europe because there's a lot of TV, footage of that on YouTube. I don't think that's like anything else, Close Another Door. Another reason why I really love them. You can see great artwork here in the booklet. There's a picture of the Beatles around a metre as well. Very similar, reminds me of that. And as you know, or if you don't know, it's important for you to know that two other fantastic musicians joined the Bee Gees. They are Colin Peterson and Vince Maloney. Colin Peterson was a child actor who was in a lot of Australian movies. He went to England to try and become, they all wanted to have a taste of the big time. There's Vince Maloney, which I'll show you here. There's Vince Maloney. He was a blues musician. And he's also in the movie. In the movie How Can You Mend a Broken Heart, which was recently released. What else can I tell you? The liner notes here of a historic nature, because they already were around for about 7 years. 1960 was their first TV appearance, so 7 years. But as far as the world was concerned, this was a brand new group. There's the cover artwork for New York mining disaster. Oh, this is gorgeous. You can hear this. Early version of, alternate take of I Can't See Nobody. And there's just wonderful tracks here. There's Klaus Wuhlmann. He's also, I believe, a bass player, but I'm not sure if he played on any records for the Beatles, but he might have played on the Bee Gees. Yeah, not sure. Great, very artsy guy. What can I tell you? Bee Gees are a fantastic group. They would spit out songs like this again and again and again that to this day haven't ever been emulated by anyone, so I think that's great. He would just spit them out like it's no big deal. Chords, that no one used, very obscure chords, and bringing that together with Barry, the magic of Barry's guitar tuning, because he uses open tuning of the Hawaiian style. So that's why when he plays an open chord, it actually sounds good because it's a real chord. Unlike the standard tuning, you can't just play an open chord, it'll sound crap. And it makes it a bit easier for him, he says, to write songs. And yes, because the way he writes songs, Barry, by the way, is he imagines it before he finds it on the guitar. So yeah, and sometimes he just mucks around on the guitar. So it makes sense for him to use that kind of tuning. And yeah. Alright, so happy collecting. I hope I've made an impression on your need for this album in your collection. And I strongly recommend getting the album. Always try and get the original album if you can, before even attempting to listen to, if you need to, the bonuses, bonus CD stuff. As you can see, that's a bit of a box set. It's a thick spine there. Alright, thank you. Thanks for watching my video.